This is Katie Weatherup. About a year ago, I fell in love with cold plunging and ended up wanting to properly insulate my 100-gallon Rubbermaid stock tank. However, I wanted to do it myself, and I don't own any power tools, and I don't have the power tool using skill set. So I came up with a different solution that can be done at home with the only tools required being some exacto knives and a bit of double-sided tape. I had used some basic insulation when I first set it up. However, it did not weather well, and as time went by, I was wanting to drop the tank to colder temperatures without adding in a chiller and going to that more elaborate step. So as a result, it was really good to get serious about having a really strong insulation solution. I opted to use a Polar Plunge neoprene sleeve for stock tanks as a big part of my solution because it gave a really nice outer layer, but I wanted more insulation than just the neoprene sleeve, so I went up to the 150-gallon version, which, as you'll see, isn't a perfect fit, but gave me room to add insulation all around the tank and then put the sleeve on top over it all, containing the interesting visuals that I had created along the way. And I used the Owen Corning's insulation, that's the pink stuff, and the 1-inch thick. And what I really like about that is it's non-toxic, so it's just a really nice, effective material. It's way easier to cut than the foam that I used in the cover that, tends to have the little peanut pilling kind of thing. So it's very easy to cut, can be done by hand with an exacto knife. So that was the next important piece as far as materials. I used this Good Stuff gap filler that's a spray that could be used to fill in the gaps between the insulation. The exacto knives, it's good to get the kind that will go out very long so that you can really easily and smoothly cut the foam. Once you score it, it breaks off really nicely, which was very helpful. And then I used a bunch of neoprene sheets of various thicknesses to fill in the gaps that weren't covered and also to make the cold plunge the shape that I needed it to be, because if you're familiar with these Rubbermaid 100-gallon tanks, they have a lot of different layers to them, and I didn't want to leave any air gaps. I also threw in a bit of ordinary bubble insulation foam just as a kind of a gap filler where I needed it. It's a lot less expensive than the neoprene, but doesn't do as much to insulate. And a nice rigid kind of neoprene adhesive that was narrow that I could run around the top at the end, just to have everything really sealed in and solid. I ended up using 2 full sheets of the insulation, the panel insulation, and I had a good bit left over, and I went a little overboard. There were a lot of places where I used 2 layers, and the part where I cut all the layers into little pieces to fit in the bottom part was just over engineering on my part. You certainly could have done that much, much faster and easier with the gap filler spray, but I happened to just be enjoying the project, so I did a lot of cutting these foam bits to fill in the different areas. And then I used the neoprene to fill in the shallower gaps. So around the edge it's adhesive and it just stuck on after I cut it to size. Once I had all the various foam pieces put in place, I used double-sided tape to hold them in place temporarily. At the end, with the cover over it, I wasn't needing a really strong hold, but then I used the Good Stuff to spray in all the gaps. I went through 2 bottles total. I just wasn't particularly adept with it, but it is really easy to use, and the nice thing is, even if it kind of goes everywhere, it's very easy to trim with an exacto knife, especially if you let it get a little bit cured but not all the way. After all the cut to form pieces were sprayed and the gaps were filled in, I put an overall flat sheet of insulation on the bottom and on the sides and used the aluminum insulation, the bubble insulation around the end caps to make everything really smooth. And then I pulled on the 150-gallon Polar Plunge sleeve, which is a lovely thing. The one challenge was it's not quite tall enough. The 100-gallon is actually a little bit taller than the 150 Rubbermaid. And so then I used more of that neoprene sheeting around to just really thoroughly kind of fill in the gaps. And then I ran the narrow, more rigid neoprene around the top and the edges. I also cut out a floating thermal blanket to lay across the top because that is helpful for reducing the amount of temperature transfer. And then I used the hard cover that I created that I talk about in the other video. This ran me a few $100s all told, and for me it was a good investment because I'd already been using the cold plunge and enjoying it, and so I really trusted the sustainability of having it in my life. And this has definitely made a massive difference in terms of being able to get it colder and have it stay colder regardless of the weather. I also have it in a pop-up tent, which I like for the privacy. I'll do another video at some point with my whole overall setup, but I know the shade also helps. But overall, I think the biggest factor is getting really good insulation all the way around, and insulation that will weather well and last for a long time as opposed to the part that was breaking down after a year.